I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, welcome to West Point, Mississippi. And
yes,
we've got a topic that we're going to talk about today that we have been paying attention to for a number of years. And it's
turkeys.
It is, but you know, the broods and the brood survival. And the fact that there are people that are able to study this is just absolutely so amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nesting and brooding. I mean, I'm raising them up, and that's what it's all about.
Yes. So, you know, through the last few years, we've been hearing about some turkey numbers are down in places, and there's a lot of smart people looking into what's going on. We're so happy about that, and we're trying to breathe we'll put some air under their wings, if you will, shine a spotlight on these type of research projects.
Save the poults, man.
It's so important to understand what's going on. Taxi, this is near and dear to you, I know.
Very.
Okay.
He likes turkeys.
I do, and actually, whenever I have my little saved emoji, because my description or my whatever analogy or my whatever you want to call it for symbol of Poults is a big bright sunshine. Mm-hmm. So whenever somebody sends me a picture of some Poults, I respond with a big sunshine because it is pure joy to see them. Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here looking at all the objectives of this project they're working on.
Pretty serious.
And, I mean, talk about covering a lot of bases. Mm-hmm. This is awesome.
Yeah,
yes.
We could probably cover this in about 5 episodes, but
well, let's get them introduced so we can talk here. Richie, thank you for having these guys, bringing them to us. But we've got 2 amazing people who have spending a lot of time researching turkeys. But I'll start first. We've got Colter Chitwood from Oklahoma State University.
OSU.
Yeah, Colter, you've been on before. We've done a couple of shows
Cowboys.
with you.
Yep, I still quote him from what he said in the first one we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, friend of the show, I like to say.
Oh,
Colter,
nice.
I picture you spending a lot of time out there. Tuesday nights, you'll probably catch the television show and watch it. Or I'm just picturing that. That'd be a good place for you to say, yeah, I do.
Yeah, when he's going over.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, that's my turn. Yeah, I'll nod. Yeah,
when he's going over.
I even saw that show. I guess it was over Christmas break, and I was at somebody's house and it was replaying, and somebody commented, and I said, "Yeah, I'm in that," and they're like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm in it. You want to watch it?"
Yeah, that's right.
So that's happened several times. Yeah.
How about that? And sitting next to him. And I don't know, she's a grad student, field technician, Oklahoma State University. Boy, guys, just cross your fingers here. Cyrena Bedoian.
Yes, sir.
Did he nail it? All right.
Yes,
Go,
yes,
Bobby.
What
he
a
practiced
last name.
That's
all
the first
morning.
time ever.
He practiced all morning long.
It's downhill from here, guys.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. All right, that's a wrap. Yeah.
That's the shortest show y'all had.
So we've been keeping up with what you guys have been doing. I know Joe White went out there and filmed.
Mighty Joe.
Yep. Richie's been UPSing GoPros back and forth, but this has been going on a long time. But so, Colter, can you just kind of start us at the beginning and bring us up to speed?
Yeah. So kind of like you alluded to, Oklahoma's not been immune to concerns related to turkey population decline. And so some years ago, just happened to correspond with my arrival here on faculty. I started in January 2021, and the state agency, which is Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation, or ODWC, basically had a research task that had just been put out. And that big old list that Dudley was joking about of all those objectives, I'm going to go ahead and blame Dwayne Elmore for that. I believe he's also a friend of the show.
Yeah, we've had Dwayne on.
Yeah, y'all can ask him about that in more detail. But Dwayne was the kind of initial driver, the lead PI of the proposal that we wrote. But of course, there were several other colleagues here at OSU. We've got colleagues from Texas A&M University, Kingsville. that are handling the genetic component of the project. And so combined, we put the proposal in, and again, Dudley joked about the length of those objectives, but it's kind of a throw everything but the kitchen sink at the wall and see what we can figure out. And the state agency had collects data on turkeys yearly, right, with harvest records, and they do some kind of window counts related to poults per hen and things like that. But they'd not really collected any kind of hardcore research-driven vital rate data in 30 years. And so these apparent declines that Oklahoma was seeing, which were, like I said, consistent with what many other states were seeing, was kind of the driver behind, kind of hitting a refresh button and getting some vital rate data, trapping some hens, monitoring nests, looking at poult survival, trying to figure out if there was kind of a low hole in the bucket there. And so that brought in multiple opportunities to work with students. Cyrena is the second of the 2 master students that have worked with us on the eastern side of the project. We also have a PhD student. His name's Cody Griffin. He's on the Rio Grande side of the project here at OSU. And then there's a PhD student down in Texas named Michael Barrett, and he's working statewide on the genetic aspect of the project.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about genetics of late.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of new technology to where we can learn more about genetics than we have been able to in the past.
So I've got a question before you get into that. I'm just curious what the last couple of years trends are. I remember meeting your state director of Fish and Wildlife, and he was talking about that. I think the population was down at the time 40% over its peak at some point, and the season was knocked down to just 9 days or 1 week, basically 2 weekends. Is that right? Is that something about like that?
Well, you're, I think, generally right about some of the numbers the state agency was seeing. The decline was notable. I mean, there's definitely some concern, and there's pockets that are worse than others. Matter of fact, part of the reason that Cyrena is working in the southeast is that seems to have been hit particularly hard. Likewise, Cody is out in the southwest corner of the state. But our season is about a month. Oklahoma now comes in. So next week, April 16th runs through May 16th. And that's about a week to 10 days shorter than it was historically. Matter of fact, around the time I got here, I think it was opening around April 6th.
Okay.
So they did shorten it just a bit, and they did reduce the bag limit. It was 3 birds statewide. Although you could only take 1 per county.
Right.
It was a 3 bird statewide limit, and that's now been reduced to 1 bird statewide.
That I do remember the one part too. And he might have said we're reducing it a week or so, and that's what I took is it was open a week. But I guess my question is, that's maybe 3 years ago when the house is burning down everywhere and this year, the year we're in is the hatch last year. Mm-hmm. Our state director, Adam Butler, and they said we tied for the best hatch or poult to hen ratio or whatever in recorded history all of a sudden. And so I'm hearing around the South, at least, an increase in the number of jakes are seen. And then we have a big camp. We entertain a lot of people in Texas. They saw for the first time in several years an uptick, and they saw lots of jakes. And I'm just wondering, is there a possibility of some broader environmental issue? Because it's hard for me to understand why that would be in such a broad area, and maybe what y'all have seen in the last couple of years, if you can touch on that.
Yeah. Toxie, I think that's a good point. And it's one of the things I think that, on the scientist side of it, makes you scratch your head because
yes, exactly.
like I talked to Adam and then of course other researchers like Marcus Lashley, who y'all have had on, who's in Florida, he and I go way back. And it is surprising when there seems to be this consistent uptick and this consistent downtick, depending on what year. Oklahoma, by and large, I hear the same thing from last spring. Just reports around the state, which, granted, some of that's anecdotal, y'all know, but there were pockets where people were commenting to us, to our team members, get word back to us that, hey, we saw more poults this year than we've seen in 5 years or 8 years or whatever. So I think obviously that's a good thing.
Yes.
The mechanism, of course, is where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly.
Right. Because we didn't, and Cyrena can speak to this if you'd like, when y'all were there videoing last year, Cyrena did oversee our first surviving poult in the whole project in the southeast part of Oklahoma. So last year when y'all were videoing, we're talking about spring of 24, that was our 3rd year of capture down there. We're now going into our 4th and final nesting season here in 2025. But the first 2 years of the project, none of our marked hens raised a poult, like period in the story.
Based on roughly how many was it?
Well, across both years, that was somewhere in the realm of 60 to 70 individuals.
Wow.
At least as captured in the winter, right?
Yeah.
So some of those might have gotten killed before nesting. Some of the hens might have gotten killed during nesting. But
Right.
of the 60-ish birds that made it into nesting season, of those that hatched, none of the backpacked birds. It doesn't mean there wasn't a poult born in McCurtain County.
Oh, right,
obviously.
of course not.
But none of the backpacked birds that we were tracking successfully raised even a single poult to the age of 28 days. Matter of fact, I think our oldest ones made it to about 3 weeks of age, and the hen was killed by a predator and got the brood as well.
Unbelievable.
But then last year,
Was there a consistent reason for some of that? You know, I know I'm sure it's complex, but I don't know if it was anything revealing from that, because that's a pretty scary, astonishing
it is.
number.
yeah, I'd say you're right that there's a little bit of noise there where obviously we are monitoring those broods as intensely as we can without being intrusive to the female. And again, Cyrena can chime in if maybe on the actual methods some of y'all might be interested in, or your listeners might be interested in hearing that. But I'd say predation was often the easiest thing to see,
Right.
especially when the hen herself was involved. Like that case I gave you before, where we knew that hen had, I don't remember now exactly, but she had 3 or 4 or 5 poults, some of which were marked by us and some were not. And she was killed while they were 3 weeks old and the brood was lost. So we know that was a predation event, you know, but we also, I might have even shared with some of y'all before, we pulled a poult out of a cottonmouth one time, you know,
Yeah,
so
really.
we don't know all the circumstances that led to that. Also, when we got there, the cottonmouth was dead. We don't know what killed it. We know it wasn't the poult that got eaten. And one of the technicians speculated that there was some hog sign in the area, and they wondered if the pigs had killed the snake. Of course, y'all know about pigs. I don't know why then the pig wouldn't just eat the snake.
That's right. I was going to say they eat everything, and they do eat snakes.
Yeah,
You're
they'll
right.
eat
I don't know how we would have gotten that transmitter back. It would have had a poult inside a snake, inside a
Not a
pig in
hog.
that case.
They've been running across the landscape.
But I guess what I'm saying, Toxie, is you're right. There's a lot of noise around that. It's very difficult to collect data like that in a kind of a robust way, but while also maintaining the appropriate distance, because, you know, the minute we induce some sort of behavioral change on the part of those poults or that hen, we're now a part of the problem, right?
Right, sure.
And so of the ones where we could determine anything, it seemed easiest to identify predators in a couple of places. There was one poult I'm thinking of that likely died of exposure, or general weakness. In other words, it was just a kind of like an abandoned fawn, right? Sometimes they're just not healthy. It hatched out, it looked fine, but it died in just a matter of days and was not consumed by a predator at that point. But, you know, they're small little protein packets running around in the woods and everything wants to eat them or scavenge them. It's hard for us to actually recover every single one of them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, and we're getting out over my skis with, you know, great researchers here, but it just occurred to me, what would cause something in a broader area? And so is maybe how big of an issue? It's hard for people to measure. I know it's a lot easier to measure through a university research like the nest predator stuff, but it's probably a lot harder to measure the poult predation stuff, because unless you catch it on camera, they're going to eat them and you won't know. And I mean, so I'm just wondering, how hard did maybe the avian flu hit hawks and those kind of avian predators? Or is, you know, I think the you know, Dr. Hirsch, one of the pioneers in this from Mississippi State, used to say that I think it was distemper ran in like about
raccoons.
7-year cycles, and he had 3 cycles of that where he charted where the hatch increased the year after the peak in distemper, and because of raccoons. So, but I'm wondering if there's got to be. I just can't figure unless it's like a solar flare causing something or whatever. What would be across that broader geography to cause? Because whatever happened, I hope it happens again. I can tell you that. Because it's so refreshing to finally see a few.
No, well, again, it's a great question. And all those things you just listed, as far as I'm concerned, are open hypotheses. They're all maybe the solar flare is a stretch, but you never know. Maybe La Nina, El Nino, right? I mean, that affects the precipitation that we get here in Oklahoma. But to your point, so the direct answer is I'm not aware of any data anyway near our study sites, whether in the southeast or the southwest, related to avian flu. I mean, The good news is I'm not aware of any outbreaks. The bad news is that doesn't mean something's not going on that just hadn't been detected yet. Likewise, on the raccoon side or the distemper side, we have tested, and I'm speaking of getting out ahead of it. Just in the last couple of weeks, I've got some information back from some of the blood work on our hens that, because we were sending them in to be screened for several things, we threw avian flu on there, and my quick scan of what I received back thus far did not show any exposure or any evidence of exposure in the hens from southeastern Oklahoma.
Right.
Now, again, that doesn't mean that other taxa in that system, like you mentioned, hawks or other birds of prey.
2 different big buzzard roosts, just hundreds and hundreds of dead buzzards, winter before last. And it ceased by the spring, but over the winter it was. And so even the one here, Vandy saw them and then contacted Mississippi State. They came over and collected, and indeed it was the avian flu. But it was really bad on buzzards, really bad.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, we saw them, and there's a roost at one of our places in Alabama, and there were hundreds of them. It scared me to even get near it, honestly. There's so many dead ones.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Cyrena, could you tell us about your I want to hear about tagging these poults and what a tag looks like and how you guys go about doing it. It's got to be a really delicate process.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it is. It is, definitely. And to Toxie's point, I guess to touch back on that, I've had plenty of people come up to me in McCurtain County, and they know me as the turkey girl, and they're saying, "Oh, we had a great hatch last year." And I hope so. We saw good sized flocks during capture season in the winter. But even our capture ratio of adults to juveniles is still fairly low. But when it comes to nesting time and fingers crossed success.
Meaning heavy on adults.
Yes. Meaning heavy on adults. Yes. Sorry. Not as many juvenile hens, but then moving into nesting, that poult capture, again, as Colter said, you have to be very careful because we are trying not to stress out these birds. We're trying to stress them as little as possible. And so the capture event of the adults is obviously very stressful. And so the rest of the time, it's all remote tracking from the truck. We can download, connect to their backpacks and download them from the truck. And so we monitor them all the way through nesting season. And I can look at their points on the computer, make sure she's still on that nest. And then also the accelerometer data, we can see and make sure she's still living. Because sometimes they do die on the nest. And previously, we would have thought she was still nesting. But now with this new research, we can know, oh, she's dead on the nest. Let's get on that mortality a lot quicker, collect data a lot quicker. But if it is successful and she does hatch a clutch, then she will move off with her brood. And within that day or two, once she's moved off, we will go into the nest bowl and count how many eggs actually hatched. We'll take some vegetation measurements to try to understand what vegetation, she selected for and what was successful for her. And obviously, this is all making sure that hen and her poults are nowhere near the area when we're doing this. And then that next morning, we will go in before sunrise, so right about daybreak, and we will track using our telemetry and track to the hen who is brooding over her poults. And then we will flush her. And when she flushes those poults, they scurry to the nearest cover, they run and hide, or they just keep running. And then that is when me and my techs will go and grab them, place them in little mesh bags to weigh them. And then the transmitter is, I mean, it's as tiny as my pinky nail. It's pretty small. And so my techs will hold that poult in their hand, and we do suture the transmitter, fix it onto their back. And they have, very flexible skin. It's almost as like the back of your hand. If you were to pull up the skin on the back of your hand, I will pull that up and then slide the needle through and be able to suture on the backpack or the transmitter onto their back. And it has its own VHF frequency. So then from there on out, once that transmitter is affixed, then we place them in a cooler with a warm water bottle and a blanket. Because at that age, a day or two of life, they can't thermoregulate. So we keep them warm, and we're in and out of there within an hour, sometimes within half an hour. It depends how many we tag. And we leave the area, and we'll go back and track mom remotely, download her data, and we see that she comes back within the hour to them, and they move off for the day. But then days after that, that's when it really kicks in with monitoring. So every day, every other day after that, we will find mom and then walk in on her, get close enough to not flush her, but get close enough to where we can listen for those Poults frequencies, because the transmitter is so small, it doesn't emit as far. So we'll have to be a closer distance than we would from the hen. And we determine, are they present or are they not? And if they're not, we search for them as much as we can based on previous movements. But oftentimes, I mean, you're looking for something as tiny as my pinky in the middle of woods. So sometimes it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, and it can be very difficult, except for those opportune times like the cottonmouth story, where it is just present or absent if that poult is there or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask, if they've been predated or whatever, there's nothing left. I'm sure they just consume it all, depending on what it was. So rarely do you actually find the poult's body like dying from some, cold, virus, anything like that. It's mostly just disappears.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah, the one I mentioned was from the previous master student, Nicole. That one example from earlier was a case like that, where we did recover the whole body, but it was because, it was just weak or died of exposure or something along those lines, and wasn't eaten or consumed by a predator.
Cyrena, when you say you got to get in there, you find the mama, and then you get close enough you try to get close enough where you can get some pings off of the poults. How are we talking? A couple of 100 yards or closer than that?
I'm talking around 40, 30 yards.
Oh, that's really close.
Yeah, that's tight.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So it's very delicate, because you're making sure you don't flush that hen, but also you want to get close enough to hear the pings. And I mean, especially in McCurtain County, when you get into later summer, we have so much rain, so much vegetation growth that you do have to, unfortunately, be that close and that quiet to be able to even receive that signal from something, this small, when you've got vegetation up to your neck. So,
and some layers are pretty thick, and I would say, just to echo Cyrena, as far as our work instructions for the crew, flushing the hen versus the hen knowing you're there are two different things. And y'all know from trying to get close to turkeys, it's likely mom knows they're there for sure at these ranges. But because mom is tending to these little tiny creatures running around in the leaf litter, we keep our crew such that we don't want mom to blow off of them again, like would have happened during the capture. And so, as far as I know, running on going into about to start year 4, we haven't had any problem with bumping mom off, other than in that initial capture where you have to bump her off.
Right.
And we're also I'm just going to add to Cyrena, we're also only marking give or take, we're trying to go for about half of the brood. That saves time on the processing and the handling of the birds, of course, that are captured, and the time associated with our disturbance for mom to come back. And because we can, for many years, as y'all know, y'all have talked to a lot of other turkey researchers, flush counts, brood counts have been done in different ways for decades. We can still do that later as well. And so, though it might be great to be able to mark the entire brood, there's a trade-off between the amount of time it might take to make all of those captures and the amount of disturbance versus just getting a portion of them marked and then being able to evaluate over the upcoming weeks based on flush counts or other observations, how many poults are moving around with it, right? So you've got all these check-in points. You can kind of assess what the nests look like to estimate how many appeared to hatch. Then during the capture event, Cyrena may recognize, oh, I saw 6 or 7 or 8 for sure. We caught these 4. Then when she goes back each day, she's listening to those pings. But at weeks 2 and week 4 and on out from there, we can actually also follow up and potentially later conduct a flush count when they can fly and actually go, oh, yeah, she's still got 4 with her. And we know 2 of those are marked. So 2 of the marked ones are still alive and 2 of the ones we never caught are also still alive. So, as you know, there's a give and take in all that because it'd be great to have full data on everything. But that's weighed against the animal welfare side, which we're obviously trying to be really careful with if we're worried about population decline, right?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Dudley, have you got a question?
No, I'm kind of overwhelmed actually. There's so many objectives, and I've been reading ahead, and
we could take a break if you need.
It's like
I'll go.
Go, Lanny.
Go for it.
So, I mean, just thinking about this, obviously you spent a lot of time around nests and broods and poults and hens, and I hear it looks like you're trying to determine, the home range. How big an area are we talking about? Once a hen starts nesting, does she range with these poults, and does she stay in a specific area, or does she come back to a specific area, or is she just kind of nomadically wandering through the landscape?
What you think?
Well, from last year, we only had 7 hens successfully hatch their nests. And even then, we had predation events on the hens post-hatch. So from looking at the data, they would stick in maybe that stand or maybe move off into the next stand within a couple 100 yards within the first few days. They don't move around too much, I would say. But lots of our poults pass within the first 2 weeks. So my knowledge is not, I guess, until independence, 60 days, unfortunately. So it's pretty localized. They're not moving around too much just because those poults can't keep up. And usually she's nested in a good enough area to where they can maneuver the habitat, and they are finding enough insects to keep them filled. But I would say it's within a couple 100 yards.
Wow.
Maybe to the next, like I said, the next stand over. We had very few hens that I guess moved, I would say, even a half mile.
And do they take the poults back to the nesting site?
Not that I saw. They would just keep moving. Every day they're foraging somewhere new.
Interesting.
Which I think is it's not Cyrena's responsibility at this point or for her masters, but one of the things that we want to look at collectively over the project is, given the land cover characteristics that we have down there in that site, which is, we're working a lot on National Forest, Weyerhaeuser. We've got a memo of understanding with Weyerhaeuser and work with some of their team. Matter of fact, there's a Weyerhaeuser representative on Cyrena's committee. We work with another private timber company down there, and then other private landowners as needed. But as y'all have probably discussed with other folks on the podcast, and certainly heard others talk about in the hunting world, there is a question about brooding cover. And we have not put pen to paper analytically yet on this project to look at our spatial data from our hens with broods to see exactly how they're using that landscape, because having been down there quite a bit to visit the teams, there's some places where I'm thinking, man, where's this hen going to take a brood if she's successful?
Right.
Yeah,
That matches what we think she needs for
Right,
them to
yeah.
be that young.
So do the timber companies in that area, and I'm assuming this is southeast Oklahoma, which is similar climate to what we have here in
Yeah, so I was just
Mississippi.
looking at.
Do they burn there? I know they don't burn here.
I've seen some plots burned and others not.
Okay.
I think it depends on the timber company.
Yeah, my general take is there's probably less fire than we would all like to see, less fire than we could have. I mean, there's probably some groups that are just simply not pursuing it. But there has been some, and actually some of that I've personally driven through is on U.S. Forest Service land.
Yeah.
So it was burned. It was burned by the feds. It wasn't even private timberland.
Right.
That's good.
Good for them.
I know you said y'all were working with some public land as well. It'll be cool to see the differences in the future as y'all continue this study. Being able to compare the different habitat types and, compare it to, who's successful and who's not as successful.
I guess it has to be the right habitat, but a burn I'd make possibly the ideal brood rearing area, especially if it was adjacent to some cover. And I would think, but what are you really looking for when you say, because we've heard before from people, I love from your perspective and from where you are, what is the ideal kind of nesting type situation for the habitat and then brood rearing? Because I do know that, listen, everybody, there's a difference in the two. Yeah.
And Cyrena can chime in if she's been to more nests than I have down there now, but certainly the kind of the going thought and the published data, we feel like we've got a pretty good understanding of nest site selection in the sense that picking cover, whether it's a burn system or not. Imagine a burn scenario. You know what that looks like. If that was freshly burned in February and March, stuff's going to grow back pretty quick, but not dense enough to hide a hen. And so, but 2 years and 3 years, maybe 4 years post fire before it just turns into an absolute mess, which, like you pointed out, Southeast Oklahoma is a lot more similar to the Southeastern United States with respect to the structure that you can expect to see in the years following fire. On the brood side, our expectation, as Cyrena alluded to, is access to bugs. And what I've seen from driving around out there is that sometimes some daylighted road edges look pretty good to me because there's some sunlight and there's some forb and weedy growth that you can imagine little poults getting through.
Right.
But I've also been deep into some of those pine stands, and I'm thinking, man, you could pull off a nest near here probably, but I wouldn't want to march those poults through this, really from a poult perspective, almost like a little biological desert.
Right.
Because where are they going to get all those bugs? They got to walk half a mile to the nearest roadside edge to find a flowering plant. Yeah. Now I'm painting with a broad brush there, but
right.
I think the question you're asking is, those are two different structural and cover conditions, and it is possible as we finish up this project and really do the analyses that we might find that to be a bit mismatched. I think it would be a safe bet. Cyrena can disagree with me, that nesting cover is not limited down there where we're working. But I wouldn't be surprised to find there are areas where brooding cover does appear to be limited. Right. Yeah. And so again, don't fully quote me on that because I'm kind of predicting, but I'm predicting based on the data we're starting to collect, what we're seeing with our own eyes, our familiarity with that system. And I think broadly that kind of matches what I'm hearing out of some other places in the southeastern U.S. So I don't think I'm out on a limb too thin there, but we have not done a full on, habitat selection style analysis yet. That could be something that's forthcoming.
That's interesting. I never heard it quite put that way. It makes a ton of sense. I mean, and you think about it, she's, especially, I guess, an experienced or older hen, she's probably pretty good at selecting something, she's getting to at least she's getting to select where she wants her nest, but she can't always select the great spot to raise her poults because she's got to take them to food, and that may be where they're really exposed or not safe and stuff too. So the combination of, I've always said we've got a few places that we actually have had fairly good luck over time, and it's going to go away before long, but we thinned some pine stands maybe 8 years ago, and it's getting some sunlight, but there's a lot of like briars, and they grow up 4 or 5 feet. You can't even go through them. Even when you burn them, it just turns them into some hard thing. They don't really burn up. And so there's no way a hawk or an avian predator could get down to the poults. But on the ground, it's clean. They could run real fast and stuff. And I feel like that's a really safe place for them, you know. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know.
I will say I agree with Colter. There are some spots where we go to nests and I'm like, man, this was amazing. I don't know how this nest failed. I mean, this is so hidden. It took us an hour to find even just the eggshells. And then I'll go to other nests and I'm like, why did she choose right here? This is awful.
Yeah.
But then at the same rate, some of those really, really great hidden nests are in, young pine stands, 5 to 10 years old, and you got briars up to your neck that you're fighting through. So there's great cover, but everything around that, it's going to take her a while if she did hatch, to get those poults out into anything that they could use. And especially with them being that small, 200 yards is a long ways for them, in the first couple of days, just trying to find what they need.
Wow.
So,
Colter, I'd like for you to take us back several years to when y'all decided to do this project. Mm-hmm. And the thought process sitting around a table saying, okay, we're going to grab these poults when they're a day old, and we're going to sew this little transmitter on the back of them. Had this ever been done before? Were y'all breaking new ground? Did you have something else to look at to say we can do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get kind of glossed over that. So admittedly, it's weird sounding. And Dwayne, like I mentioned before, I always throw him under the bus if he's not here to defend himself. Where the idea came from was, given the concern and the potential value of survival, a true survival estimate, really ideally comes from a marked individual. Or that's a real standard approach in wildlife anyway. And we know that flush counts have their imperfections, right? Y'all have probably seen this before. When you drive around and see hens and poults in a field in August, which poults belong to which hen?
Right.
You don't know, right? We know they group together. And so now ratios of poults per hen, that's why we do it that way. But there's also hens on the landscape you're not seeing. And so what we wanted to do is get at a true marked survival estimate, to see if we could identify, back to kind of what Toxie was talking about before, cause-specific mortality at those young life stages. So to do that, you want to try to put a mark on it. The best time to mark in this case is going to be something you can monitor remotely, even though we have to get fairly close. We obviously don't want to have to re-catch that individual. And so this method did already exist and has been done in the grouse world. It's even been tested and evaluated in the bobwhite world. And the slightly more invasive nature is the risk, right? The actual capture, the actual handling, the disturbance of the hen. The procedure itself is really clean. I mean, it's kind of like doing anything else in the field. You can wear gloves. We've got, a needle that's sterile. When she said suturing, we're literally buying sutures from a local veterinary office, no different than they would use on your dog in a surgery. So that is coming directly out of like sell them in cassettes. It's coming directly out of that. It's in a sterile or antiseptic solution. So by and large, all of that leads us to believe that the relative risk of that marking process is pretty low. It's probably not much different than just the disturbance process itself, i.e. flushing a hen every 2 weeks to see what's with her. And so far, at least with turkeys, we haven't seen any negative, any obviously negative. I mean, everything we do has risk, first of all. We should admit that. I think we've talked about that before when I was on here talking about pronghorn stuff, right? Anytime you're handling an animal, we are taking on a non-zero probability that we're causing harm in some way, shape, or form. What you look for are signals that the transmitter itself is causing a behavioral problem. And I have heard of anecdotal reports related to some folks that tried it with quail, I don't remember where it was. Apologies for that. I don't even know if it's published, so it may have just been word of mouth. But the area they were working in was really thick, and they found that the transmitters hung up in vegetation. Well, that would be a problem, right? If you're just a couple ounces and you're trying to run around and not get killed and keep up with mom and eat voraciously at all times, you don't need to have a little tiny backpack that we put on you getting you snagged in vegetation. And so I think there probably are situations where this would be a terrible idea, whether we're talking about turkeys or grouse or quail or any other bird. But in our system, based on what we're in both of our systems, Southeast Oklahoma and Southwest Oklahoma, though vegetation density late in the summer is really high, it's kind of like y'all were saying before. It's not dense thatch at the level of the poult. It's vines and shrubs and all that grows up, and so we've not seen any evidence as of yet, going into year 4, that that poults are getting snagged in vegetation based on the transmitter.
I bet you just take a deep breath before you go in there and lay your hands on those little poults and start working on them. Though that would just make you take.
I'm gonna tell you what, to be one of your whatever graduate assistants working on this, or whatever how you describe them, one of the prerequisites has got to be athletic ability.
Yeah, you got to be quick.
Because I mean, maybe they're not that big, but I've been around it before. Where they are quick as lightning.
Mm-hmm.
It is a rodeo you can read a protocol on a piece of paper all day long and be like, that's easy, I got it. When you actually go in and flush that hen, those poults go running. It is a rodeo to try to get them, and they do keep running.
Yep.
Y'all get them. Yeah.
But once you have them in hand, it's remarkable that,
gosh, that feels so cool.
28 days on the ground, well, even more time with mom laying, and that they're already surviving to that point. And, you give them best wishes and send them on their way. It's just remarkable to see that little being grow up to be what you capture in the winter.
It honestly is a more endearing moment for me, for sure, to come upon a hen that's got poults than it would be to, kill a big longbeard hunting.
Sure.
It's just the most special thing. I don't know what it is about it. There's something about it, that rebirth in nature in the spring and going back. It's just
that
incredible.
Sense of wonderment.
Yes, it is.
A feeling of wonder.
Yep. And that respect for mom, what she pulls off is amazing.
Yeah, well,
especially in today's world.
Good mama.
I tell you what, speaking of that, I've got a treat. Nobody knows that this is about to happen.
No, I stepped into it.
Cyrena, Colter, we've got this video came in about 30 minutes ago. One of our friends, Bubba.
What?
Yes, Bubba sent me a video that he
Our
filmed
buddy
this
from the peanut patch.
Bubba.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a mama with 10 poults, and she's fighting off a snake. So let's watch this real
Let's
quick.
see.
You said that about the poults, but I've been around. I've even had a hen come after a tractor I was on before, until the poults got far enough away, and then she took off in the opposite direction and ran. I could see her running back around to get to them, but she came and stood in front of a tractor and was going to take it on for those poults. Yes, sir. Coolest thing. It's been a while.
Look at there.
This is very cool right here.
Look at those little dudes.
He said there were 10 poults, and he didn't tell me what kind of snake that was, but she was.
It looks like a dead snake to me.
Yeah, she's wearing
him out.
Looks like a garter snake.
Yeah, looks like a big garter snake.
A big one.
Don't mess with mama. Look at that.
Colter, are you guys seeing that?
Yeah, we are. That's amazing. Yeah.
That's brilliant stuff.
Do you think at that age those poults are learning that snake is a threat? Or
Are
they just getting out of the way?
Who knows?
Well, yeah, a little bit of both, maybe.
I think they're learning that if they got mama, they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Where was it? Was that Florida?
This
One
in
of them
Florida.
just stopped and snagged a grasshopper, looked at me like.
Yeah.
Like, hey, mama's got the snake.
They're
I'm
not-
going to eat this
They
grasshopper.
don't seem too worried. Mama's got it in
It
hand.
looks like she's kind of playing with it.
Yeah.
Cyrena, do you think you could catch those poults?
I would hope so.
She's
Yeah,
well
you know,
trained.
That looks a lot nicer than a lot of the times when we're trying to capture them. Nice and open.
Y'all are right. I should include those types of questions in my my future hiring interviews.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, but Cyrena played collegiate volleyball, so
There you go.
we were pretty good on her athletic ability.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be agile.
Yeah. Now what's your
Volleyball.
GPA? What's your 40? Yeah.
Maybe a goat roper would probably be pretty good.
Yeah.
Doing
being
that.
quick.
Yeah.
Did y'all see any major, significant differences between the study in the Southwest and the study in the Southeast?
That's a great question. Let's see. So broad strokes, not really at the level of nest success, pretty similar at this point. 2 years of Rio nests coupled against the 3 years. We started the eastern side 1 year earlier. So 3 years, and they're both sitting around. I think the overall average nest success is around 17% in both sites. Where they differed a bit, and this is great timing because we're talking about poults, is we were seeing better poult survival as indexed via our marked poults in the Rio study site over the Eastern study site. So, and by the way, that wasn't driven by just 1 year. That was even just year to year. On average, we were seeing more of Cody's Rio poults survive compared to Nicole or Cyrena's poults on the eastern side of the project. So that's probably one of the most obvious differences. Obviously, as y'all know, the cover conditions are very different as far as the Southwest Oklahoma and what it looks like relative to Southeast Oklahoma. So I'm sure we could go into the weeds on how hens are using the landscape and roost site selection, things like that, because they're very different systems. But those metrics that you've probably been thinking about when it comes to turkey decline, the biggest difference that I've seen so far was in that brood or poult survival or brood success, however you want to say it, metric.
We were discussing that before you guys came on. You start getting western or, out in some of the hotter areas of Texas or Oklahoma, a lot of that more or less stays in that early successional stage.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Southeast, it can grow out of that early successional stage more quickly.
Yeah.
And not get set back.
Yeah, you have to have disturbance.
So that was kind of what we were thinking. Places where you traditionally saw quail and where you still run into a good many quail, it seems like those just kind of stay in early succession.
And certainly Western Oklahoma has a lot of areas with good quail numbers still, to your point. And Cody's area has much more grazing and agriculture as just a proportion of land cover relative to where Cyrena's working. So by and large, you can just imagine it's a lot more open country. And that, to your point, that does mean there are areas that look very different, and you might imagine look a little bit more like what we might want to see a brooding hen take her brood to.
Yeah.
Also, the southwest portion of the study, just very different trapping, obviously, but Cody has about 4 roost trees, whereas we've got thousands of roost trees.
Yeah.
So
Right, yes.
very different.
Colter, I'd like to ask a question that from the very beginning, it's just kind of stuck me. And if I'm asking something I shouldn't ask, just point out. But so I want to go back to those 60 some odd hens not raising a brood. Is it possible that some of this equipment that's attached to them is making their life a little more difficult, or it's causing attention to them that could be creating a problem? Y'all are gaining so much knowledge from the research. I'm not criticizing. I'm just asking.
No, I think it's a great question. And I think I actually just had this conversation. We were just at a small local conference here in Oklahoma. And I actually talked about that very thing. If we're not constantly evaluating our procedures and considering what we're doing from an animal welfare perspective, we're not doing a good job. So the short answer is absolutely there's that risk. That risk has existed since the first transmitter ever got put out on a turkey decades ago, all the way to the absolute thousands that are being tagged right now, on the myriad turkey projects that are occurring all across the range. What I think the lines of evidence that give us some confidence that it's a small risk is the amount of work that's gone into looking at the weight relative to the weight of the bird, right? So almost all these projects and scientists you talk to, they're living up to guidelines that various professional societies have, as well as guidelines by what's called the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or IACUC, if you want to shorten that, IACUC.
Yeah.
That's something we have to go through at the university level. That committee even includes a member or two of the public, right? And veterinarians and wildlife experts, because everything that we do, from putting a backpack on a poult to, in some cases, camera trapping, like if you're camera trapping with a lure or a bait, all of that has to be approved by IACUC. And so I think those efforts help us know that we're doing right by the bird.
Yeah.
The other thing is seeing the birds that do survive and periodically making recaptures, seeing birds outlive their transmitter, seeing that birds are successful even with transmitters on. The preponderance of evidence then is that even though we know it's a risk, it's likely fairly low.
I will say too that because I'm on the tail end of this long study, I've captured birds from the previous student. I've captured my own birds, recaptured them that we've already tagged, and taken transmitters that they outlived and replacing them with new, fresh transmitters.
Wow.
So all that to say, I mean, these birds are tough, and all they form is just a callus to it, but they're used to it. Now, as far as the behavioral component, where they're still going in front of a rocket net, and why they still chose to do that twice or sometimes even 3 times is beyond me. But I will say, just in my 2-year or the second year, we're still capturing birds that have previously been tagged, and it's not impacting their success or survival.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what anthropogenic means? Anthropogenic features. I thought that was something to do with humans.
He got it.
Is that what it is? See, Bobby? Huh. That's that Mississippi State University education right
Is
there.
that what that is? Okay.
Yeah, that's just human associated stuff, right?
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of things on the Oklahoma landscape, some more relevant than others, depending on which study site we're in, that could also be affecting how turkeys use the landscape, right? So we're talking about energy extraction, whether that's oil and gas, that could be wind energy. So even renewables are, impacting the landscape, and wind farms are increasingly common in Oklahoma. There's obviously more standard row crop agriculture, grazing, how those blink on and off, road systems, a lot of those anthropogenic, right? They use that big global term, those human influence structures and just disturbance on the landscape could be influencing how turkeys move.
Yeah.
And that actually is part of why that we have the genetic component in this project. Is there were some anecdotal stories out of Western Oklahoma where we have these kind of historical Rio roosts, and there's a handful of stories where ranchers had 300 birds 20 years ago. Now they have 30. They had 200 birds 15 years ago. Now they've got 25. And so are birds gone? Did they disappear and it's a true decline? Or did they start using the landscape differently because there were barriers to movement? So that piece is the genetic side that our partners down in Texas are helping us with, because they have the lab capacity for that type of work. But for that, we used a lot of our blood samples off of our hens, but we also used hunter-donated tissue samples. So we solicited from hunters for the last several springs, sent them a little kit. They take a little tiny piece of, breast meat or leg meat, just something off the bird, ship it back to us, and then we could look for signals genetically of things like gene flow, whether or not there might be genetic isolation, potentially implying that there's a barrier on the landscape. So that work is ongoing.
Lanny, we're always in here. We always have these interesting guests, and you're always on your computer. What's up?
I'm looking at Onyx the whole time. I love the app, but I love the desktop too.
My favorite thing is Bobby doesn't know how to shut his computer down, so I can go in there and share his pins to my account.
That's what you were doing in there this morning.
Yep. Back during deer season, I shot a couple of big bucks.
Of course.
As I'm looking for them, I can turn on this tracking feature.
Yeah.
And I can see where I've looked.
And I use that feature too for spreading seed, spreading fertilizer, spraying. It really keeps you on track.
Onyx is a great company. Look, we know Jared. They're hunters,
They
just
are.
like we are.
Yes,
So they're
no
serious
doubt
about
about
this. The way they've designed this thing, a hunter and a gamekeeper can take advantage of it and make their property better.
Use coupon code Mossy Oak to save 20% off of your Onyx subscription.
Yeah, and Mac, you shouldn't do that now. Richie, you got to help me. Okay.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Hey y'all, Jim Ronquist here with Drake Waterfowl and Old Tom Turkey Products, talking about some of the new lineup for this spring. One of the more popular is the SWT collection, or Spiderweb technology. This is a highly breathable micro-vented stretch fabric for maximum silent mobility with a durable water repellent finish that'll keep you cool and keep you dry and keep you going in the spring woods. Be sure and check it out at a dealer near you or drakewaterfowl.com/Old Tom.
Yeah, I was looking forward to getting into this about the fragmentation and all the different landscape features and yeah. So how are y'all planning on collecting data for that?
Well, it starts with that tissue sample, so we can basically use genetic techniques that if you think about a map of Oklahoma, right, we can get that hunter to hopefully they at least give us the county. But hopefully they give us a lat long, right? I mean, I'm not trying to get Toxie's hunting spots, right?
Yeah.
No.
It's always funny.
Good luck.
We are.
Yeah.
It's funny. People act funny about, especially a big deer somewhere, and going crazy, trying to get on the place, thinking they're poach it, lease it out from under someone. And I go, the deer's dead. I mean, you need to find
one's gone.
You need to find
That's
somewhere
right.
else. So they send you a tissue sample from a gobbler. He's dead already. Find another
Well,
spot.
I had a great conversation with a guy one time because he kind of looked at me funny. It was in person. He kind of looked at me funny, and I was like, "Dude, it's your granddad's farm. He's not going to let me hunt there. What are you protecting?"
Hey, turkey hunters are
I'm
funny
not gonna
now.
Go ask your granddad to hunt there.
But just like that hen has instincts,
Unless he offers
turkey
it.
hunters have the same instincts. We just don't give it up.
That's right.
That's right. Well, but to get back to it, right, what happens is you can imagine now you've got that genetic signature linked kind of in space on that map.
Wow.
And there are fancy analyses, we'll leave it at that, where we can look at certain metrics that kind of indicate whether there's gene flow, whether there might be any concern with inbreeding, right? And obviously we can look at that. You can look at that to some extent for movement barriers with GPS tracks. Y'all have seen those maps, right? Where whether it's a pronghorn or a whitetail or a black bear, you put a GPS tag on it and you can see those little spaghetti lines and see everywhere it goes. Yeah, but we know we also don't mark animals all over the landscape, right? So any given individual may not meet a barrier. That doesn't mean there's not one there. And so this genetic approach might allow us to look for something like that, where you could end up with maybe some sort of source sink dynamic, where some areas are maybe successful making a lot of turkeys, but they're no longer dispersing into this area that is now seeing an apparent decline, right? And just marking a handful of birds might not show you that. Just monitoring some nests might not teach you that. But looking for those genetic signatures might lead to, oh wow, this road corridor right here really might be serving as a barrier, or this giant wind farm that just went in might be disrupting this roost or what have you. Now, again, we haven't done that yet. That's what they're working on. So I'm kind of hypothesizing in how I talk about it, but that's why that was put in the project. And that's why we needed those hunters to, be willing to participate and donate. That is a really tiny, we're talking about the size of an eraser. We're not asking to steal their hard-earned, breast meat.
Yeah.
But
you won't get
we
just
have
one turkey nugget, not all of them.
Hundreds of donations.
Just send a little piece of gristle in.
When y'all said genetics, I thought too, is there ever been any indication in maybe parts of the country, maybe not there, that there's been some poisoning of the genetics from tame turkeys intermingling or something? That's come up in a big way in ducks.
Yeah, and I
didn't know if that could have happened in different areas. You might know, maybe there's a history of it and it already exists and maybe it's healthy, but it happened. I didn't. What about that?
Yeah, I have heard that, especially in the waterfowl world. I think that's another idea that's worth scrutiny in the turkey world. We know many agencies have moved turkeys around. Translocations are what led to the wild turkey rebounding, essentially continent wide.
Yes.
So we've all been, agencies have even driven some of those movements, regardless of what subspecies we're talking about. But I don't know. The direct answer to that is I don't know about any potential, they call it introgression of domestic genes. We are looking at, a lot of the hunters like to know, because we've got genetics now from all parts of the state pretty much, except for maybe the really out in the panhandle. We got a good chunk, I don't remember the exact number, in the 50s or 60s of our 77 counties. We got at least one usable sample from most of our counties. One of the things we can look at quickly is the eastern versus the Rio and the hybrid zone. And that's a question we get a lot. And, Dwayne Elmore and I had conversations about it when the project began, and everybody can Google up the classic NWTF map that shows all the subspecies. You can look at state agency maps. Our agency has one. And what little bit I've seen that I'm going to call it preliminary data, but it's a growing data set that's looking more and more firm by the day, is it appears the hybrid zone in Oklahoma is likely much wider than it's been drawn on most maps, especially in the more southern part of the state, which if you think about our boundary with Texas, Red River corridor down there, there's that might make sense that turkeys moving, whether moving east or west, could be using those river corridors. So I don't have a map, obviously, to throw up right now, and that analysis is ongoing, but our preliminary data on that shows that the farther into the northwest of Oklahoma that you get, the more clearly Rio, the genetics sort out. And the farther you get to the eastern boundary, and especially the southeastern corner, the more you get into the eastern genetics. And that in the middle of the state, even here near Stillwater, you're really starting to get a pretty much a true hybrid, where you might, any given bird might be more Rio, more eastern based on genetic signature, but by and large, they both are present, if that makes sense.
I was going to say, is there a more dominant gene or recessive gene between like the Rio, Merriam, and Eastern? Because it seems like, I guess because they're just more hybrids, because anything that's crossed is a hybrid. But it seems like, say, we got a lot of guys going up in Nebraska, and it's getting harder. It's getting to be this big thing to kill a pure Merriam, where they used to be everywhere there. And so there are a lot of hybrids or even Rios in the same area. I didn't know if the intermingling that the Rio genetics kind of took over time, or does there any significance to that at all between them?
I don't. That's a great question, and I don't know as like a pure on geneticist, which I certainly don't run a genetics lab in that way. But what I think would be worth mentioning here is the other challenge is we think about genes, and then we as hunters are often looking at that kind of phenotypic variation.
Right.
It's related to that underlying genome.
Right.
But even that can be variable. I've had people come in my office, the two you can see right here. would easily pass for most people as Rio looking fans.
Oh, for sure.
One of those was killed in western Montana and the other in eastern Washington.
Wow.
Huh.
On all the state agency maps and the NWTF map, those are Miriams.
Right.
And so part of that, you get at the history of the translocations and the restocking efforts. And so I'm not trying to dodge your question, Toxie, but I think it's worth noting that even when we knew underlying genetics, that doesn't mean there's not some variation in the colorations of the feathers. And so you could be shooting, say, a true, like this is a true Miriam's genetically, and yet not get that white, that full white tail fan. Maybe it's a little bit more buffy like these above me.
Right.
But I don't know is the best answer to your question.
Well, I mean, honestly, from at least my perspective, if there's no difference in the genetic makeup and, whatever their part, one and the other, they're hybrid, or any of them, as long as there's no loss in, nesting vigor and success, and, I'm fine with whatever gives us healthy turkeys to enjoy,
So I've got a 2-part question for Cyrena. With all this technology that you've got access to when you've got a transmitter on a hen and everything, can you see and tell the day she decides? So she's laid 11 eggs and you see her leave that nest. Can you tell to the day when she decides she's going to start setting?
Yes. So good question. Well, the tags that we use, we're able to take GPS point, or they take GPS points. We program them to take every 30 minutes a point when she's in high activity, so when she's moving around, and then every 2 hours in low activity when she's on the roost or sitting still on a nest. So we determine the initiation incubation. So when she's sitting that first day, we determine that as whatever the first night she sits on that nest, then that's that start of an incubation. And then we go 28, 29 days from there, and we keep a close eye on her. So whenever that she spends the first night basically on the nest, that's when we're like, okay, we need to lock in on her and just make sure we're remotely downloading her data daily. So we can make sure, I can see when she recesses, whether that be every day or every other day, couple of days. But if she leaves that nest and does not return prior to our suspected hatch date, then we go in, we listen, we make sure that she is off that nest, and then we'll see what happened. We'll do some sort of investigation to, determine, was it predation? Was it abandonment? What exactly happened there? So luckily with our GPS, this technology, we can get on it. I feel a lot faster sometimes than some of the older technology. And also just being able to click through her points and see when she's been laying and then when she sits, and just how she's doing on that nest. And like I said, we had some hens last year that got predated on the nest. They got smacked on the nest by a predator. And so with that, those tags that we have, not only do they take GPS points, but they have an accelerometer in them to where we can plot that on a graph. It almost looks like a heart monitor, like you see in the hospital where it's going up and down. And then we can see when she flatlines. And we can get that down to about pretty much the hour to where we can determine when did she die. And then maybe that could also help our investigation of, okay, maybe what animals are present during that time of day and different things like that. So it's pretty cool what those transmitters can do and what we can glean from that data.
So the second part of my question is when they first hatch and mama's taking them off somewhere, can you tell by, you know the geography of the property and you're seeing where she goes, is she being careful about where she takes them? In other words, if is she avoiding a big creek that they probably can't get across until they're a certain point in age? Is she mindful of barriers and those kind of things? Can y'all tell that?
Really, I'm thinking of barriers are maybe, dirt roads, but
They just ran right across.
Yeah, our successful hens. I mean, we had such a small sample size. It's hard to say generally this is what our hens are doing. When we only had 7 hatch, and I think 6 have poults that made it a couple of days or 2 weeks. She's taken them in within that stand or within adjacent stands, or like Colter was saying, to open edge areas to where there's a lot more insects. I wouldn't say it's fine scale enough to see if she's avoiding certain areas, but the pasturelands, or like we do have, we call it the airport. It's just like a open landing strip of open grass forbs, and they mow it every now and then. It's just not forested, basically, while the rest of our area is. She would bring them in there, and they would forage through there. But I can't say exactly off of such a small sample size that she was necessarily selecting against certain areas.
Okay. I just always, I mean, I'm envisioning them being a good mother.
Yeah, they're being
and
good
thinking
mamas.
about that
Sure,
kind of stuff.
I would think so. I don't know how you could prove it, but you'd think they would be.
Bobby, can I add, before y'all move on to another question, y'all brought up the technology thing, and I think this is pretty cool. There's a variety of tags out there, many of which nowadays from a GPS standpoint can get you the same thing. They vary in how programmable they are. They vary in how you can download them or use satellite or whatever. But the ones we're using and having that accelerometer in it is pretty cool because that's still pretty novel, even really in some of the big game world. And one of the things that we're trying to do is also look at the behavior you're talking about. You're saying, hey, can you identify when she starts incubating? Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And yeah, we can get there even if we're a few days behind it when we detect it. You can backdate it pretty reliably now. Well, what about the laying behavior, right? Y'all know, and many of your listeners know, that these hens are taking a while to lay that clutch of eggs. And that clutch of eggs is exposed when she's not there to defend it, right? Mm-hmm. Sure, they might knock a few leaves or a little bit of brush over it, but they're not always perfectly hidden, and she's got to come back each day to lay that egg. And so us and some other labs are trying to look at how that accelerometry data might help us identify those laying behaviors so that you're queued up to that process. And anecdotally, small sample size, but based on Cyrena's work last year, she and her team found 8 hens that they were able to identify in the laying stage. And when that hen was nowhere near that nest site that they suspected, based on the data, they suspected this was a nest, they would sneak in there and look, and lo and behold, they would find that nest bowl with eggs in it. So now we're going, oh my gosh, we did rightly think she was laying. This is where she's going to be nesting. Mm-hmm. Good for us. We already know. Now we just got to wait on her to incubate. Mm-hmm. And 4 of those 8 never made it to incubation. Mm-hmm. Wow. They were disrupted
before
via disturbance to the hen or death of the eggs themselves. In other words, predation of the nest itself. 4 of those 8 never even made it to the incubation. And that, I think, is a really interesting thing that we should be talking about, because now if we watch that hen and we wonder why it is that she never incubated until May 1 instead of April 10, well, what we thought was her first nest is probably her second nest.
Yeah.
So we've misidentified the first nesting effort. The first nesting effort failed before she even incubated. And I don't know what the rules are in turkey physiology related to, does she just pick up at a different spot the next day, laying that next egg? Because again, if so, that means that our understanding of clutch size relative to the incubation date, relative to whether it's a first or a second attempt, that all gets really muddy in a hurry if notable portions of our hens might be getting disrupted or their nests being taken before they even get to incubation. And by the way, not to steal it from Cyrena, but she's already found one this year. One, we haven't yet got a hen to incubation, but there's one they identified during laying, and it's already been depredated during laying.
I think we've talked about this before, but I have to revisit it every time for myself. So I appreciate y'all clarifying it. So when these hens start laying eggs, they're getting with a gobbler and then they're going off to nest and they're laying an egg. That night after they lay that first egg, are they staying on the nest or are they flying up again? So they're flying up again and then doing the same thing until they have an approximate clutch, and then they're on the nest all the time. Gotcha.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why Cyrena was saying that part is increasingly with the technology clearly able to be defined with GPS data.
Yeah.
And that accelerometry data, because you can see that she becomes still on that nest. And then other than recesses, she's now locked to that site until we hope, hatches 28 to 29 days later.
Yeah, so you'll look at their movement and they'll be foraging with the other ladies, or they'll be off on their own foraging, and then they'll make a pretty drastic movement, some different amount of distance to a point once a day, and then go back and keep foraging with the girls, and then go back the next day to that same point. And so during this time, me and the other student, we're pretty locked in on our computers, just going through points and looking through movement data, trying to find those laying points, because like Colter said, we had just seen in previous years, and the state agency came to us with, hey, we're capturing X number of birds. Why are this many fewer only attempting nests? And we were able to determine, well, they're attempting nests. We just haven't, been able to find that they're being predated in the laying phase. So we're not actually capturing that initial first nesting attempt. That actually might be her second or third. So we did have hens last year that they laid 8, they laid 10, or maybe they just got to 4, and then it was predated or lost somehow. And then she had to go to a different location. And then that is her actual second attempt. Yet in previous years, we may have thought that was her first attempt. So it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool.
Oh,
to be able to look
it's
at a
very
computer
super
and
cool.
then
Everybody here
later,
thinks it's cool.
Have this like Easter egg hunt and actually find the nest, and then be able to lock in on her and just make sure she either sits on them or makes it to hatch.
And is there any consistency to the average number of eggs before she starts incubating?
Well, usually, the going thought, right, is, you expect 10, 12, 14 to make a full clutch. But there's some variation in that. And certainly as the attempts go on through the spring, there's evidence that subsequent laying attempts often involve smaller clutch sizes. And that's why we're saying that means it's important to understand what attempt she's actually on.
Right.
Because most of us don't expect 4 eggs to constitute a first attempt.
Right.
But maybe we actually didn't see that she'd already lost 8 or 9 eggs before she ever incubated the first time. And so a month later, when we catch her incubating over 4, well, that makes more sense then. That was actually her second go with a clutch of 4. I'm making those numbers up, of course, but you understand.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying for sure.
They've got such a tough road.
It's a tough one.
Yes, honestly, it's a miracle how they make it
Bobcats.
through.
You're exactly right.
Couch, bobcats, avian predators.
And we've talked. You said it before. Was it 90% of the poults that hit the ground?
Well, that's what Dr. Hurst said. He said at the time he did, I think the 7 years of it, he said that 92% of the eggs laid were eaten before they were ever hatched.
And then of those that were hatched,
he said
90% don't make it to flight.
Right. He said they make it. So I think there was like out of 100, they would have 2 that actually made it to, on average, to 14 days. And he said it's crazy that the mortality rate of a 14-day-old poult to become like a 2-year-old longbeard we all crave hunting. The mortality rate's very small after that. He said the magic date, if you can hatch them and get them where they can flutter up off the ground to get away from the ground predators and stuff, that you've got most of that's not everything, but that's most of the battle. That's what he always said. So I don't know if that's we found out anything different since then, but
it was like 90 on the eggs, 90 didn't make it to being able to flutter up, but of the ones that did make it to flutter up, 90% of those made it.
Yeah, and he said, the by far lion's share of that they, from what they measured was raccoons and possums. Eat as far as the egg predation.
It's tough being a turkey egg.
The raccoons actually predated a lot of poults. I don't know if you found that too, according to him.
I mean, and
again,
this is just the tip
been a long
of the
time
iceberg
ago.
on all this stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
So we're looking forward to hearing more.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe in 4 or 5 years, y'all will start getting some data, about where the nest is and whether it's more successful or not, and all that good stuff.
I could ask y'all questions all day long, but I got to ask one more. And the older I get, having more fun, kind of watching them as much as anything, and observing them and being out in them. But is there this is in scientific terms, but are there certain hens that are just great nesters, raisers, have more success, and subsequent years they have more success than some that are just failures at it? Is there something to that? I know it's got to be the older ones that are more experienced, but it just seemed like if they ever had a successful clutch and got them all the way through, she'd have a better chance of doing it in the future. Is there something to that where you got a couple of superstars that kind of grow everything for everyone? You got
any superstars yet?
Well, the one hen that we did have her poult reach independence, and actually it was the one that we tagged, but when we did the flush count, we saw 5 total. So she was a super mom, and she was a super granny because she was actually one of the first hens ever tagged on this project back in 2022. And we re-tagged her and we kept track. So, she was an older hen, but obviously she had 5 that were already flying at and doing well at 4 weeks when we flushed her. Right. So there's an example. But then we also had a younger hen that I tagged last year, and she attempted 3 nests and abandoned all 3 of them. Yeah, that's what we don't know why, but that's just one example of, I think, 2 very drastically different hens.
Some humans are better mamas than others. I mean, it's probably in the deer world too or something. I'm just wondering if there's something, I don't know where that leads us, and maybe other than if you think you've got a super mom, you better take care of her.
Yeah,
but
whatever it takes.
Toxie, there is evidence, in longer term data sets that a handful of hens can be the driver of that recruitment. And in the big game world, there's a whole kind of subfield of research called under the umbrella term maternal effects.
Wow.
Right. And y'all might have heard that with some of your guests in the past. We think about deer antlers, and you think about big bucks that have good genes breeding to make fawns that are going to carry those genes. Well, half of that genetic material still came from the female, right? Mm-hmm. The doe. Mm-hmm. And so I think that actually the question you asked, I think maybe the better technology gets, the more we keep thinking about the types of things we can measure, whether that's on the landscape or that's in the behavior of the hen. We might increasingly get at maternal effects and actually better understand what might separate a quote unquote good mom from a bad mom. There's evidence of that in other species. I don't know why that might not apply in the wild turkey world.
I mean, it is so evident. It was so evident when I had a bunch of pet chickens. Some of them were amazing moms. Some of them were terrible moms. And then you see it in the plant world. Craig Harper's research, oak trees that produced way more than all of their siblings.
And why? We don't know.
And maybe it's a God thing, but I can't help but think, and we've talked about this already, but in the past we were trapping turkeys from these small areas,
right,
and shipping them all over the place. And there may be 3 and 4 state areas that have turkey genetics, from a population of turkeys that covered 10 square miles 50 years ago. And I can't help but think that may be affecting something with genetics. And hopefully y'all will find that out soon.
So look, why don't we do this? Have you got some rapid fires for them real quick?
I do, actually.
All right. Meant to do that at the beginning. So y'all sit back here just a second. Dudley's got a few questions to ask you. We got a segment called Rapid Fire. It's brought to you by our friends at Nutrient Ag.
Our good friends at Nutrient Ag. Yeah. That's right.
They have offices out there in Oklahoma too, Colter.
The best in the business.
Yep. Got any needs? Go see your Nutrient Ag guy.
All right, Dud.
Okay. Cyrena, we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions. I think we've gotten Colter before in the past, but
yeah, you can relax, Colter.
Just get to know you a little better. Get to know you a little better.
I would say y'all better be careful picking on her.
Yeah. This looks like a bunch of chicken scratch, so hopefully I can wade through this.
Turkey scratch. Yeah.
Turkey scratch, yeah. All right, Cyrena. So we're going to ask you about 10 questions pretty quick. We just want to get to know you better. So are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
All right. Fur or feathers?
Fur.
Eastern or Western Oklahoma?
Ooh.
Eastern.
Easterns or Rios?
Easterns, obviously.
Here's a food question. Hardee's or Carl Jr.'s? Which do you prefer?
Neither.
Good question. Good answer.
We were joking about that earlier. Do you prefer hunting or collecting data?
Collecting data.
Do you prefer?
I haven't gotten a lot of hunting experience.
Do you prefer hunting or habitat work?
Habitat work, I guess.
Do you prefer collecting data or habitat work?
Collecting data.
What interests you more, the hens or the gobblers?
Hens.
Mm-hmm. What is a hobby or something you enjoy outside of your research?
Staying active or building community through church or going to the gym.
Awesome. Which came first, the hen or the egg? That's
the egg, I guess.
Did you win any Easter egg hunting contests when you were a child?
Maybe one or two.
Yeah,
all right, that's it.
Good job.
Very good job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sounds like we need to take Cyrena hunting.
Yeah. That would. Well, I tell you what, if she would,
I like the habitat work over hunting too, and I hunt all the time. So,
Ditto me.
Yeah, we all love the habitat. We spend more time on the habitat. We do hunting. All of
it's
us.
so
that's
addictive.
For sure.
I was sitting there listening to a turkey gobble across the line this morning, and said, "You know what? I'm sitting here hunting, and I need to be." Making this to where they want to fly down to my side.
That's exactly right.
So I got up and walked away.
And I can assure y'all that is going to occur in the next 6 to 8 months. I mean, he's got to be in his bonnet.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's look over at Richie. Richie, we've got Colter, and you better pay attention now. We've got a trivia question for you guys.
Ooh.
We've got a new trivia sponsor, the Peanut Patch.
No doubt about it.
If you like boiled peanuts, Cyrena, have you ever had a boiled peanut?
They're delicious.
And I don't want to.
They're high protein. It's good.
Delicious,
Super good.
Cyrena.
The Cajun ones are delicious.
The best.
Yeah,
they are.
Colter knows. I can look at him and tell he likes a boiled
peanut. He's a Georgia boy.
Yeah.
You know?
Got to, yep.
All right, go ahead, Rich.
All right, today's prize winner is Taco Life 25.
Oh.
So I left a nice review here.
Is that Vandy?
It could be.
It could be. We're about to find out.
I'm going to say I bet that's a Tacoma person. Toyota Tacoma.
Okay. Okay, my bad.
So his review here says, "This is a great show. Thanks for all your tips. I finally harvested my first turkey at 37. One of the best feelings ever."
Play the horns for him, man. Let's
way to go, Taco.
Way to go, Taco, man. Yeah.
So you hating on those Tacomas?
Yeah, he's probably sleeping in the back of his Tacoma, chasing turkeys.
Yeah, so maybe it
everywhere.
was Taco Man what?
Taco Life 25.
Taco Life 25.
All right, so we got a couple of winners.
All right. So, well, that's the only winner we have.
Oh, just him. Okay, go ahead. He got it all. Yeah,
Bobby's suffering from sleep deprivation just like the rest of us.
What did he win?
Well, I'm assuming a Newcomb blind.
That's exactly
the Newcomb
what
blinds
he
have been
won,
a hot item around here. It's turkey season.
They're
so great stuff.
That's going to be great for him going on future turkey hunts.
Yep.
That's right.
We need to send Colter one of those. Yeah. Hide that black shirt.
All right.
Why is he hating on the shirt?
What's up with the shirt?
I don't know. It's just so black.
It's Oklahoma State
It's
colors.
Oklahoma State.
Cowboys.
He's a little
I gotta
stinging from the Auburn
I
loss.
gotta remember to
the other
wear
day.
like a Hawaiian print or something next time.
Apparently
Fly your
so.
colors, man.
Wait, hey Bobby, we will send him something, both of them, something they can wear next time. Okay?
Is that Warren Buffett's school? Is
Go-
that right? No.
Bobby was thinking maybe a bolo or something would accompany that.
There was a really the guy who really loved quail. That's who you're thinking about. That a benefactor for Oklahoma State University, Colter. What was this guy's name? He loved quail. Very wealthy guy. Left y'all a bunch of money.
Well, there'd been a bunch of those.
T-Boone Pickens.
Yeah,
That's
exactly
That's it. T-Boone
That's it.
Pickens. Not bad.
yeah.
T-Boone's Pickens.
If you're talking about him, yeah, he left us a daggum football stadium, among other things. Yeah.
Those are nice.
You know, while we're talking about it, everybody's giving money for football and stuff. Let's keep up with. We've got these land grant universities.
Yes, sir.
Support your forestry. Support your wildlife. Support
100%.
your fisheries.
This research is more meaningful to hunters than anything going on.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, we care about the resource regardless of the hunting even, honestly. We love critters, but this research is so essential. What you do, and honestly, it's staggering how broad and how much, because I thought about what I would say about y'all listening to it, and it's so many people fall in this category, but you got, in life we're kind of measured by how much we care about stuff, and the care that goes into this today, how much y'all care about the resource, about the turkeys. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's everything. And I mean,
It is everything.
It's really amazing the last 10 years how that's grown through our great universities and other places, but largely through the universities.
Sure has.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
All right. So here's our question here. So, we all love and know the book Where the Red Fern Grows. All right. So where was the book setting at?
I think the question said at.
Well,
You don't end a sentence with a preposition, Richie.
Sorry,
wow.
English major.
English teacher.
Yeah.
Good
Jumped on that grammar police jumped out quick.
Yeah, he's on
Because you
that.
wrote a book.
Just 'cause
you
he
think
wrote
you
a
can tell
book.
somebody.
Yeah.
Thank you. That handle might stick over
And
here.
by the way, he's the most William Faulkner king of run-on sentences person I've ever met.
Totally.
Yeah. I
Totally.
don't.
So if you'd
Man,
like
that's
me
a-
to, I could
that's a
ask
good one.
the question again. But
Yeah.
where was the
No,
setting?
I heard it. I'm trying to think. I mean, it's been a long time since I read it. Man, there's a bunch of states I kind of want to say, but I'd probably thinking about I don't know, maybe Virginia.
Oh my goodness,
Oh,
Colter, back
man,
up just
back
a little
up
bit.
there.
Back up just a little
Just
bit.
think it
What's
might-
on your shirt?
Yeah, what would your shirt say?
It has
Huh?
to be.
Why would we
Is that
ask
where
this
it's at?
question? Why would we ask you
Why would
guys
we
this
ask
question?
Tell me it was McCurtain County, right where she's trapping turkeys.
So
It was Eastern Oklahoma.
Eastern
Eastern
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, I had,
So
I
she
had
nailed it.
no recollection of that whatsoever.
We didn't
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was in the Ozarks, and then somebody reminded me today there are Ozarks in Oklahoma. So
Yeah, that's true. I knew that.
yep. What a great book though. If guys have young kids coming up, I would recommend the book Where the Red Fern Grows. Tox, you remember it? I cried reading
I
it.
know.
Big
I
Dan,
don't
little
like to
lamb.
cry.
I cried when I read it again when I was older. I mean, it's just great.
Cyrena,
That makes me want to read it again just to see if there's any other Oklahoma reference in it. I had no recollection of that. That's awesome.
yeah. Well, we taught you something.
Go
today.
ahead and get Old Yeller while you're at it.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
yeah.
The best. The best.
Anything with a good dog in it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's you talking about tearing up. Now.
My dog Skip, another good one.
Cyrena, we're real impressed with what you've done, what you're doing. All these bright young people that are studying wildlife. It's very
exciting.
impressive.
Yes, it is.
Colter, you got some great leadership going on up there, and we appreciate what you're doing. So, is there like a Instagram page for you guys to follow y'all or something? What's going on with your with your
website
research?
or whatever it is.
Yeah, I put all my lab stuff, so I'm at Big Game Doc on Instagram.
How about that?
Yeah,
Wow.
he's fun.
Good
He's
handle.
fun to follow too.
Yep. How about that? Good one.
Serena, we would mention yours, but there's probably a bunch of young guys that would start following you, and that was
Man,
just
we won't
probably
do that
not what
to
you
you.
need.
Harassment.
So,
That'll happen when the
We don't
TV
wanna
show
create-
hits
We don't
anyways.
want to
That's
create
exactly
harassment.
right.
Nope.
so
Mine's a little more personal. It's not only work related.
But
Yeah.
we'll put her work stuff on the one. I did create that really for trying to share some of our lab work, and we try to put updates in there when we can, and if we ever have calls for like when we were asking the hunters for tissue samples and things like that, we try to run that through the big game doc page. So
cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just called all the hunters out there, step up, because I said this years ago. We didn't actually figure out how to run research through here. It needs to be through universities. But I was just saying especially like the disease part, and there's turkeys dying of diseases or viruses or something maybe really deadly, and maybe one out of a couple of hundred or less than that are ever even found when they die in the wild. I mean, maybe a forester or a rancher stumbles onto them, but there's just impossible. So who could actually help us unlock what's going on? Hunters, because they're taking more. They got the fresh tissue samples all over the place. So
that's right.
My thing is hunters step up, because it makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And if there's probably other universities. I think Dr. Chamberlain's done some stuff too. But, go to his page, his website, his Instagram page, whatever, mention it and participate. It's really easy.
Yeah, it is.
And it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does.
And if you don't, these wild animals may enter the transfer portal and move on. So
look at you.
We've got to keep the pressure on and keep hunters in science.
Colter,
right.
Colter, I want you to figure out. You got so many projects going on. I follow you. Be thinking about what our next TV adventure with you is going to be. We want it to be something fun. So.
All right,
episode 3. Yeah,
maybe he needs to come participate in the harvest of something instead of just talking about research, Bobby.
Well, he could.
Yep.
I mean, we could go out there with him somewhere.
Oh, here we go. He's horning in on your radio spots. No.
All right. Well, thank y'all for being guests.
Yeah,
thank you for what you do,
here.
putting up with us, letting us film and showcase what you're doing.
Absolutely, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being interested.
Oh gosh,
we're very
it's our love.
interested. Yeah,
it's our love.
It's
very much. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service.
Well, guys, this has been an interesting one.
Very
much.
I'm just blown away by their ability to do what they do.
Well, in the age where we all worry about this more, it's just so endearing to know we've got people that care. Like I said, they care this much that they're on it, and they're on a mission to find out what's really going on.
And the NWTF, we should have mentioned this, has been supporting this project as well.
They are the backbone of so much of this everywhere.
Yep. All right, this has been good. Thank you, Richie. This has been fun. We got to go. There's a lot to do. Say goodbye, Dudley.
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.